G'day everyone and welcome back to Starseeds and Patriots of Down Under this morning. Yes, it's Tuesday morning, the 12th of March 2024. What a great day. First of all, I just wanted to start just by saying quick apologies for my, let's just say, a little bit of out of turn behavior yesterday when I was did a video in relation to calling out some individuals. Yeah, I was pissed off. And I do apologise for that because not many of you get to see me like that very often. I'm pretty, as I said, most of the time I'm pretty level. But yesterday I'd had enough. After seeing what I saw the other day with Danny and Elena talking about the individuals that have done what they have been doing, I thought it was only rightful to chime in as well on behalf and back them up, but also tell of my experiences with certain individuals such as Eric Hecker and Robert Earl White and those that are in Australia here as well that are talking shit and stealing other people's material. Now, one thing I want to point out in here, like I actually, because of my video yesterday, I actually lost a subscriber, which is fine. I really, as I said, I don't care about subscribers, likes, shares. I'm unmonetized. I don't give a flying crap. Okay, but obviously someone didn't agree with what I had to say yesterday, and I'm gonna just remind the audience just now is that this whole awakening process that we're all going through, this becoming consciously self-aware, okay, isn't all sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and freaking unicorns, okay? But anyone that sits there and says, "Oh, I'm awake, I have been for 8 months now," right? Or whatever time you've been awake. None of us are awake, okay? None of us. We're in the process of becoming consciously aware, and we're in the process of awakening. If we were awake and awakened to our true inherent gifts that have all been laying dormant within our DNA, then yes, we would be truly awakened. If we were using this pineal gland to see, truly see, then we would be awakened. But you'd have to be a lot more. But I've had people in the recent last few weeks that I've met sitting there saying to me, "Oh, I'm awakened. Yeah, I know what's going on." But if that's the case, then why is it when I ask certain questions about this or that or this or that, they go, "Oh, no, I haven't." Unfortunately, some of these people are a little bit too over egotistical and too eager to be awake. Yeah, but that's all right. If it's all part of their process of their awakening, and I don't hold that against them. I don't hold it against them for leaving yesterday my channel. I'm sure they'll be back at some stage. If they do, cool. If they don't, I don't care. That's up to them. But if they think for a second that this whole ascension process is sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and unicorns, and that we don't have our bad days, yes, we do. We all have our bad days. I mean, I met someone who sat there recently and told me that they're truly awakened or whatever, but then they showed me their screensaver on their phone telling me about these are the things they have to work on. And it just kind of made me realize to myself, oh my gosh, like, are these people truly, really even consciously aware of what they're saying? Like, yeah, it baffles me sometimes. It really does. But that's okay, because it's all part and parcel of everyone's journey, and that's for me to get my head around. That's not me being egotistical. It's just me trying to get my head around things. But yeah, we all have our bad days. We're only human. That's what being human is to make mistakes, falter. It's how what defines us is how we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep moving forward regardless of the bullshit. Okay. And not care really in regards to other people's opinions if they are negative in regards to you as a person. It's only negative energy that weighs you down. You don't need it. Just let it go. But yeah, I just want to quickly touch base on that first of all, because just as an apology, because not many of you get to see in that frame of mind. I was pissed off. I'm perfectly fine today. I can still use the word pissed off, but not a matter of tone or facial expression that I was using yesterday. I'm I'm feeling a lot better today. That I got that off my chest. And the fact that I was holding that in regards to Eric, and in regards to Dale, and in regards to others that are doing what we know. Like, seriously, there's only so much you can take of it before you have to release. Okay, and that's what I did yesterday. It was a release. So, anyway, as I said, guys, Starseeds and Patriots are down under. If you've been here, if you're first time here, please be sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can keep up to date with our latest videos. And yeah, leave comments if you like. I'd like to hear your feedback. Always good to hear feedback, whether it be constructive or critical. Doesn't matter. I can take them. But live, I'll be also once this is up now. I'll be in the live chat with you. So hit me up. Quite happy to give you a conversation. But yeah, let's get on with it. I'm here today to do chapters 11 and 12 of Genesis for the Space Race by John B. Leith. So what do you reckon, everyone? We get into it, hey? Alrighty. Okay. Just add you to the stage and off we go. Oops, didn't want to go. There we go, everyone. All right, we're there. And as you can see, you too, as well, from yesterday, I didn't have my StreamYard. I'm back with StreamYard again today. It was just a basic video, so I didn't think I really needed to use that yesterday. So anyway, let's get on with it. I'll just take a quick sip of my coffee, so I can whistle. All right, let's go, everyone. Chapter 10, Admiral Richard E. Byrd finds the South Pole entrance to the inner world. Hey, Hitler is alive. Those were the first words that Joseph Stalin said to President Harry Truman and Prime Minister Winston Churchill when a discrete moment was available at the 1945 Potsdam Conference. The body in the bunker was not that of Hitler, Stalin said. The hair, teeth, and fingerprints do not match. There you go. That disproves automatically that Hitler died in the bunker raid in Germany of World War II. Okay, they had obviously a body double or doppelganger. Okay, and it's proven here where it says, then he gave the complete autopsy details to the Prime Minister of England and the President of the United States. At the Potsdam Conference, it was agreed that America would send the first expeditionary force to the Antarctic to look for the departed German leader and the missing nationals who had left Berlin and Germany by various routes in late 44 and early 45. It was also agreed that as soon as preparations could be made, the United States would invade the Antarctic and the old allies, including Russia, would stand by if further offensive action was needed once the Germans were located. Okay, let's just move this up. Therefore, according to plan, the United States assembled its Russian and British-approved South Polar Expedition. Existence of the round-wing planes would also remain secret, and only conventional weaponry would be deployed. Curious, because the Cold War had already developed the round-wing anti-gravity aircraft in America at that stage, excuse me, and they were keeping it still secret at that point in time from Richard Byrd and his expeditionary force. All right. The entire 1946-47 operation was billed as the largest expedition ever sent to Antarctica, or to the Antarctic, and was given publicity for the media back home, rather than attempt being made to keep the expedition a secret. It was also intended to establish a permanent US base in the subcontinent, a move that had been delayed when the temporary American bases of 39 and 1940 were abandoned because of the war. That would explain why there's so many bases down there now under the treaty. Now you've got US, China, everyone down there, Russia, every nation has got a base there. Now, as much as there's not supposed to be military bases there under the treaty, it's easy to get away with having a military base when you've actually set it up under the guise of a research station. Okay? And that's why there's so many bases down in the Antarctic, regardless of the treaty. But also because of what's been found down there recently in the last few years, especially. Well, for me, the information goes back as far as 2002, okay, that they detected under the ice, a heat bloom that came from under the ice. And it turns out that heat bloom that came from under the ice was coming from Lake Vostok. And this is when I first heard about the information about the mothership underneath Lake Vostok was when the heat bloom. Didn't know about the mothership as such at the time. Okay, but I knew about the heat bloom coming from under the ice, which only suggested to me that there was something there creating and generating heat. Okay, and roughly 27.6 degrees Celsius. Okay, there was 27.6 degrees Celsius. It was in the water. Went up on top of the surface, freezing. And the fact that it came from Lake Vostok, a heat bloom, well, now 20 years later, 24 years later, or 22 years later, since 2002, we now know that there's a mothership underneath Lake Vostok, thanks to Elena Danaan and Dr. Sala's information and those that have come forward and releasing this information to them. Okay. Okay. They've been delayed. Sorry. Yeah. Because of the war. But although Admiral Byrd was the figurehead of the expedition, his real role was disguised. He would lead a search and find foray into the Antarctic, where it was assumed by many the German leader and his troops had retreated. An accompanying naval force out of Norfolk, Virginia, under Rear Admiral Richard H. Cruzen, included 13 warships, 19 planes, supply and transport vessels, equipped with helicopters and an icebreaker to lead the way, and a submarine to aid in any type of underwater research or assistance. All vehicles were Caterpillar tread-type tractors, as these would be required to tow overland the sleigh and toboggan loads of building materials, Quonset huts, warehouse, weather stations, abundant food, clothing and all accessories, especially fuel and oil to transport a 4,000-man force in a hostile freezing land, where ice and snow was up to 2 miles in depth. The Antarctic adventure was a full-scale naval and overland expedition, and in a real case sense was a continuation of World War II, provided an enemy could be located in the 5.5 million square miles of Antarctic mountains and vast snowy wastes. At Christchurch, New Zealand, a branch station was set up as a midpoint for communications between McMurdo Sound, 2,365 miles away. Also at Christchurch, additional repair parts and supplies would be stored for eventual movement to the Antarctic, where they would be required by the 4,000-man force. Byrd had a final meeting with the military in the United States, at which time, on orders of President Truman, he was forbidden to fly his own aircraft until he reached the Antarctic. The flight to McMurdo Base departed from Hueneme, California Base. I hope I pronounced that right, everyone. Hueneme, California Base on February 1st, and carried Byrd's co-pilot and navigator combined, radio man and photographer representing the National Science Foundation and National Geographic Society. They set a course for Hawaii. As passenger, Byrd sat back reminiscing with his navigator. Would have been a nice flight. The following day, I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. The following day, Admiral Byrd and his crew took off from Honolulu for the aircraft carrier, where his Antarctic plane was waiting to take them on the last leg of the journey into the South Pole region to find the whereabouts of the 250,000 Germans. On the 4th day after departure from Port Hueneme, Admiral Byrd arrived at McMurdo Base in the Antarctic, where his fixed-wing plane would be observed from a round-wing plane of German origin, hovering silently above the Sound. So upon arrival into Antarctic, where Byrd had flown from the carrier over to the base, sitting silently in the sky above the actual base, observing Richard Byrd's plane and the team arriving, was a German origin round-wing aircraft anti-gravity type craft in observation mode. Obviously wondering what they were doing there and trying to gain perspective on whatever they were planning to do. Okay. Byrd's team had been the first to fly over the South Pole on November 29th, 1929, and for him, this updated trip, of course, was no mere polar exercise. On this occasion, he was resolved to find the missing Germans. The irony surrounding the expedition as a concept, however, was that while some planners were told it was a polar training expedition, Byrd knew from 3 former expeditions into the Antarctic that this trip would entail untold hazards and perhaps a lot more than a hidden valley where rumors told of a German hideout or last stand. But it was Admiral Byrd's May 9th, 1926 aerial expedition in search of the North Pole, accompanied by co-pilot Floyd Bennett, that first fired his zeal to return again and again to the polar ends of Earth. It was Bennett who first awakened Byrd's imagination about the inner Earth being hollow with possible entrances at both poles. Proven. It has been proven that. And some say, I'll actually upload photos for us to actually cruise over about that, because I've actually got satellite photos, not of the actual poles, but the actual north and south. But I've also got some of the old maps of the old world, not just normal maps, okay? I mean, most of you have probably seen these maps, but I've also got maps of outside the ice wall, which are also starting to come to light now that most people are starting to find, okay? But they do clearly depict that there is a whole entrance at the north and at the south, okay? Especially when you see satellite footage, not satellite footage, what's called STS shuttle footage, from I think it was 1981. There's actual space shuttle footage that exists where they're looking back at the North Pole, where you can clearly see the opening, clearly see it. So yeah, and I think I have a photograph of that too, a still of that actual footage. So I'll see if I can find that and pull that up for us as well at some stage. Okay, Bennett had long noted an important similarity in all previous Arctic North Pole accounts. The weather became warmer and farther north a traveller went. For instance, the log of Dr. Fridtjof Nansen. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Fridtjof Nansen. It sounds German, or actually sounds Icelandic. In 1893 and 1896, seemed to show conclusive proof that the North Polar region was not a frigid ocean of ice. Nansen's conclusions read, "We have demonstrated that the sea in the immediate neighborhood of the pole in all probabilities lies in a deep basin, not a shallow one. The ice seemed to drift northerly unimpeded. In 1980, there we go, NASA maps confirmed that the Arctic's ocean floor is a sloping depression beginning in northern Greenland and running about 2,200 miles. Actually, the incline of the ocean bed begins about the 85th parallel and eventually becomes the throat of the ice, which leads into the hollow Earth. The official released version of Byrd's 1926 flight from Spitsbergen to the North Pole is unimaginative and sterile. Byrd's log is reported to have recorded the following. We reached the North Pole. After taking 2 sun sights and many pictures, we went on for several miles in the direction we had come and made another larger circle to be sure to take in the North Pole. Not disclosed in the official accounts is the following paraphrased but authentic record of that 1926 journal in its final hours. Bennett urged Byrd to proceed at the existing altitude over an ocean devoid of ice. Devoid of ice, no ice. The horizon of which seemed to enlarge beyond the 85th parallel. As they continued, the compass became erratic. The tailwind increased and the sun's position sank lower. The tri-motored forward plane continued only a short distance into this area of mechanical confusion and navigational uncertainty. Then Byrd became fearful, decided to turn back and head for base. They had seen and felt the unknown. From that day on, Byrd and Bennett, until his death in 1928, shared the same observations and determination. They had observed that the spherical Earth was concave at the so-called top of the planet, and that the Arctic Ocean apparently disappeared into an unending black hole before they reached the base that had resolved to return. During the following year of 1927, the author confirmed that Byrd and Bennett flew again to the top of the world, but this time they had penetrated into the Earth's interior. Their new sponsor was the United States Navy, and they departed in secret from an unknown base at an unknown time, and to this day no official word of that flight has been made available to the biographers or compilers of this book. Byrd is reported to have flown about 1,700 miles, the most astonishing time of which was spent inside the Earth's interior.
His diary of the event records sightings of what looked like prehistoric animals, green forests, mountain lakes, rivers in a warm climate where tall, fair people wave to the flyers. Tall, fair-headed people living on the interior of the planet were waving to Admiral Byrd as he flew over. Proof of the inner Earth inhabitants. That's just one of many. Pictures of these interior locales were actually seen by the researchers. So there are pictures that exist. I'm sure we're going to find out during this chapter where those chapters and those reports are. Richard Evelyn Byrd, descendant of an old Virginian family who served in the US Navy prior to World War I and as an aviation instructor during the war, was to become illustrious in a tragic way. The panoramic evidence of that historic 1927 voyage was never to be shown or admitted to even exist. President Calvin Coolidge, on seeing over 300 pictures upon reading the log of the flight, said empathetically, I can imagine his words, President Coolidge, "No one, absolutely no one will believe this report." I can imagine now. Let's keep it quiet. If we release the information, we'll become the laughing stock of the nation and the world. President Coolidge was the New England realist. Yeah, I can totally imagine basically stamping this with, above top secret. It's men like that that keep us from the truth, making decisions like that. As far as I'm concerned, sorry, I just hit my cord. As far as I'm concerned, transparency is the only key here. They should have been upfront with the American people from the word go. Okay. The decision to withhold the story of Byrd's epic journey was not a contrived cover-up. As far as I'm concerned, it is. There is no national security involved. Bullshit. Others besides the president who saw the pictures and read the log simply believed that the phenomena of a world within a world was so fantastic as to be preposterous. No, I think they took it very seriously. The secretary to the late President Coolidge verified the official reaction. The pictures of the log and the log of that of Byrd flight to the interior of the Earth were sealed and immediately placed in a vault at the Library of Congress. They lay there untouched for 12 years. Then, when World War II began, the secret accounts of Byrd's 1927 flight was reviewed and became classified, under the name White Sheet Project. There you go. Let's look that up on if we can find any information to this. In the second year of the war, American intelligence and the executive branch realized the significance of another world within a world, especially when Jonathan Caldwell, the creator of the original round wing plane in the US, on a training flight in a round wing plane whose routing was over the North Pole, drifted into the black void which Byrd had come upon in 1927. Consequently, the Byrd flight, along with Caldwell's 1940 log, was relabeled the White Pole Project. When World War II hostilities ceased in 1945, the White Pole Project was placed under new Navy department called Polar Archives, where it still operates in 1978 on the 6th floor of the National Archives. Wow. So for any of you that are listening in the US, it'd be great if anyone there could actually confirm and validate that. That'd be quite interesting. Because I'm in Australia. I can't validate that. In the 1960s, NASA Archives became the repository for much of the polar activities because of the intense spacecraft action and related world research at the polar regions. Intense spacecraft action. Comings and goings. When you think about it, when you got the top and the bottom with no prying eyes overwatching or overseeing whatever you're doing from any other nation, and you're at the top and the bottom of the planet, it's pretty easy to think that if you had a secret space program or comings and goings of extraterrestrial groups or civilizations or interacting with our groups down here on Earth, and we've got a lot of activity down there, it's not hard to think that that would go unseen. You know what I mean? Especially in polar regions such as. Okay, in the 1960s, NASA Archives. Right, okay. With the reader made aware of the foregoing background information on Byrd's early Arctic exploits, we can now return to the circumstances surrounding his 1946 flight into the Antarctic, about which this chapter is mainly concerned. Okay, just a quick cuppa. All right. Before departure for that 1946 flight, the Navy allowed Byrd to add to his extensive first-hand knowledge of the Antarctic by perusal of newly acquired information taken from the captured German records and books. Most believable to Byrd were the exploits and observations of German teams sent to the Antarctic from 1937 onward. These aerial and land teams had mapped and photographed much of the subcontinent, and the reports on their Antarctic findings were an engrossing study. So I had something on my glasses then. Study that had stimulated naval curiosity. I do apologize about that. Byrd was instinctively aware that the Germans would have preferred that these classified reports had not been moved to the Americas, I'm sure, for they gave helpful clues and conclusions about the German intentions at the South Pole. Not all the classified information regarding the probes on the pole had been given to Byrd, but the facts he had assimilated assured him that regardless of how incredible polar openings to the interior of the planet were regarded by those to whom he spoke, an entrance to the inner earth could indeed exist, regardless of scientific opinion. Regardless of scientific opinion, the location of such an opening, if it existed, should be near the South Pole beneath a cloud-covered area. Which Byrd had observed in 1929, but had not been able to check. That possible site was east of the pole on a line of flight nearby the 171st meridian. Interesting. That's where the planet comes to the top and then starts to dip in. Okay? Concave-like. That's where the hole in the polar region is, as it is at the bottom as well. Reflecting again on his past accomplishments and the frustrations arising from government bureaucracy, Byrd was cognizant that 17 years after his last aerial trip to the South Pole, he and a new crew were now heading into the Antarctic again, perhaps to conclude once and for all times his polar adventures that might unravel the enigma of the subcontinent. From McMurdo, Admiral Byrd and his crew were flown to the aircraft carrier 300 miles north in the Antarctic waters. A final briefing took place and the flight was scheduled for the following morning. Each man on the crew had taken an oath of secrecy if they failed to return after a given period of time in the so-called Antarctic exercise. A massive emergency search was to be started. But regardless of the outcome, it was agreed not to inform the public of the true purpose of the excursion into the unknown. I'm sure that's the case. In the wisdom of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Byrd had not been told the secret of the round-wing plane with which America then possessed. It sounds like to me they were setting him up for failure, personally, and they didn't want the Germans to know that the Americans had also developed and succeeded with the development of anti-gravity aircraft by that stage. Wow. Sounds like I was setting him and his team up for failure. Byrd and his men checked out the conventional aircraft on which they had trained in the United States. It was called a Falcon, but had no relationship to the 1929 Falcon built by Curtiss Wright Aircraft Company. This particular aircraft had been specially constructed in 1946 for high speed and great endurance. The entire project under which it was conceived by the Navy, designed and rushed to completion, was top secret. The airplane's speed is unknown, but presumed to have been a good margin over 300 miles per hour, and its range was well over 6,000 miles. That's impressive for that time. A plane to be designed to have 6,000 miles in actual being able to reach, the actual 6,000 mile range. That's crazy, and being 300 miles an hour at that point in time. The Pratt & Whitney engines were also carefully tuned, and all unused space in the aircraft was filled with there you go, extra gasoline. That's it. That's why it has a 6,000-mile range. They utilised every little bit of space inside the interior of the fuselage to be able to fill it with extra 44-gallon drums or whatever they used. 100-gallon, there you go, filled with 100 gallons to tapped into the main fuel supply line to the engines. So they were using 100-gallon drums, okay, and had them directly tapped into the main fuel line of the engine so that they would not lose fuel whilst in flight. You know what happens when a plane loses energy or power? It starts to drop like a rock. Okay, extra food rations. Extra food rations, because of their added weight, had been kept to a minimum. In case of emergency landing, there would be no hope of survival. Indeed, particularly in the rarefied atmosphere of the mountain range that barred their path to the area of search in the South Pole region. For takeoff, the plane was over heavy. Even with catapult assistance, the pilot had difficulty sustaining safe height. It became necessary to fly at 5,000 feet maximum for over 6 hours until extra fuel was used up and its containers thrown overboard. The following are notes from the log kept by Admiral Richard E. Byrd on his exploratory trip to and beyond the South Pole and into the interior of the Earth. On February 5th of 1946, the log begins. Catapulted from aircraft carrier with full tanks plus extra tanks, the carrier located about 300 miles due north of McMurdo Base. Clear skies, headed for the settlement. Settled for the settlement there, reaching at about 6:50 a.m. Circled the settlement, flew low, waving to those on the ground who waved in return. So they were waving at people there at that point in time. They hadn't even, wow. Bird's flight from McMurdo, 400 miles due west to the first mountain chain's rim, was time-consuming. Time-consuming in as much as it became expedient to burn off his aircraft's excess fuel. It was too overloaded to permit a sufficient gain in altitude. Arrived first designated area at 3 p.m. our time. Skies very clear. Coal sack would be seen very clearly overhead. Circled the area 3 times. Dropped a small American flag outside the window to claim for the USA. Reason for circling area was because the aircraft was still unable to attain sufficient altitude to cruise over the 10,500-foot pass of the actual Heiberg Glacier onto the central plateau where the supposed valley might begin into the planet's interior. Dropped the empty gasoline drums by means of ejection chute in aircraft floor. After several hours, gross weight reduced enough to gain height and cross the mountain rim. 4:20 p.m. Arrived at the edge of the valley. Sun was still bright in the sky. We started down following the contour of the ground, taking note of the terrain as we descended. At first, slope is gradual, then it becomes steeper as though one were going down the side of a mountain. Navigator now concerned that too much excess was burned off. Ice cap beginning to get thinner, now beginning to see exposed side of mountain. Outside temperature gauge has also recorded a 10-degree rise from 60 below zero, observed at the start of the descent. 5 p.m. We are still following a slope down. The ice is now very thin on the rocks that cover the slope. See some black spots that could be coal. Sun is still high in the sky. Temperature continues to show a slow, steady rise. It could even be tropical at the bottom of the valley, maybe even Shangri-La. Only time will tell. 5:30 p.m. Altimeter shows drop of about 1 mile since we entered the valley. We have traveled some 300 plus miles in a down slope. Sides seem to be gradually getting steeper. 6 p.m. Ice completely gone. Rocks now bare. Temperature shows a steady rise, getting warmer as we go deeper. All of a sudden, we seem to have hit a bottomless pit, in which the sides slope straight down. Compass gone completely crazy and is not working at all. We are now spiraling downward. The sun is still shining, but gets dimmer as we descend. 7 p.m. We have been descending into the hole for almost an hour. Air outside continues getting warmer. A few minutes ago, we passed a small waterfall from which steam seemed to be coming. We circled so that our photographer could get a picture. As the sun was dim, we had to use floodlights to enable a good photograph. 8 p.m. We are nosing down as if traveling on level ground. The compass is now not working at all. Altimeter has shown a steady fall. Instruments indicate our ground speed has slowed to about 50 miles per hour. Funny that they were going roughly 300 before, but they're now traveling at 50. Why are we traveling so slow? 9 p.m. Calculate we have traveled down for at least 100 miles from the top of the hole. Fuel has half gone. Dropped another empty gas tank. Extra gasoline cans held 100 gallons each, made of aluminum 1/8 inch thick. It fell horizontally towards the wall as if being pulled toward ground. Readings are crazy here. So in other words, when they were flying downwards, like this down through the hole, obviously through the pole, they're going south pole, they're going this way. But as they've dropped the fuel gallon, say this is my plane, they dropped the fuel gallon, 100-gallon drum out the bottom of the floor of the plane, and it's actually being pulled towards the actual interior. It's not going back down, out of the plane and then down that way back out the hole. It's going pulled towards the actual interior walls of the actual planet. Fascinating. That's perpendicular. That's crazy. Wow. Where was I? Okay. Fell horizontally towards the wall as if being pulled towards the ground. Readings are crazy here. Haven't enough fuel to travel further into the Earth. Bell has sounded indicating fuel supply in the main tanks was half gone. Excuse me. We'll turn back and properly explore on future expedition. Our fuel will get us back if we start now. Radio is dead, no contact. Crew were confused because, though not weightless, they were able to walk up the sides and on the roof of the plane and remain perpendicular. That's what I just said, remain perpendicular. Wow. So in other words, okay, let's say we're on the interior. This is the interior of the plane, and you're a crew member. You can walk anywhere upside down, inside, or on the walls of that interior of the fuselage, and it did not matter. You were perpendicular upright. That's fascinating. 4 synchronized clocks on board, plus cruise watches kept time. But later, it was shown that all clocks and watches had gained several hours, proving that time moves differently down there. That's indeed also just as fascinating. 10 p.m. We are now traveling up at a faster speed than we went down, as if we were traveling along level ground. No explanation of it. It is starting to get cooler outside as we move towards the surface. 11 p.m. We are now getting near the top where the steep drop-off started. I had given orders to fly at a right angle from our course to determine the diameter of the shaft. Cold is starting to get intense. Outside again. 12 midnight. We have traveled for about an hour and we have returned to approximately our starting point. Navigator believes the hole to be over 100 miles in diameter. We are now ascending and steadily gaining speed with wind in our rear. Temperature outside gets colder. Speed increases automatically. Footnote. Bird later made a special report on how his speed changed without pilot aid from 300 miles an hour, as I said, on the surface down to around about 50 miles whilst descending the hole or shaft. He also told how the temperature went from minus 60 Fahrenheit on the surface to more than 60 plus degrees Fahrenheit at the point of return during his descent. They also reported seeing steam coming from out of more than one hole in the rocks and discovered cloud formations within the 125-mile shaft. The instruments also recorded a steady stream of air coming from deep within the shaft, which he felt accounted for their decreased speed in the descent. So a headwind slowing them down, but a headwind that strong, taking you down 250 miles an hour, that's crazy. It's like there's an actual force blowing it through. The Admiral recorded that the feeling within the great shaft to the interior was was uncanny, as if one were on a different planet. 1 a.m. We are now out of the shaft and going up along the slope. Have a movie camera taking shots of all rocks and looking for signs of life or vegetation as we ascend. Ground ice forming and getting thicker as we go up. 2 a.m. We are now at the top of the valley and will fly across to record the distance. Can barely see the sun coming up in the north. At this time of the year, it stays up most of the time, about 4 hours a night. 3 a.m. We are across the top. Finally, Navigator calculated it to be approximately 500 miles in diameter at the top of the funnel. So the shaft is 100 miles wide. That's the shaft going down into the interior, but the hole at the openings, north and south, are 500 miles in diameter. That's a big opening. So 500 miles, you calculate how many 737s you could put wingtip to wingtip flying down. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. 100 miles even, you know, going down the 100 miles. How many, that's 100 miles in width across. How many planes could you fit side by side going down together? That's pretty crazy. Okay. We are now heading for home base and the carrier. While at in the throat of the funnel, or as Bird called it, the spiral of the screw, the crew saw in the distance a formation of at least 5 UFOs converging from deeper in the interior. This sighting was also tracked on their navigational radar. As the UFO formation reached Bird's unarmed plane, a craft positioned itself on each wingtip of the American plane. I've seen a TV show where they did this. They obviously went, oh, that's crazy. I've seen a TV show where they did that when I was a young boy. Wingtip of the American plane. Bird's photographer continued to photograph his silent paces, which revealed clearly defined German swastikas on their tops and bottoms. Actually, the German circular wing planes made no warlike maneuvers, nor did they make radio contact with Bird on that particular expedition. But, bold but not foolish, Bird's pilot was instructed to take no evasive action, and the photographer advised to continue photographing with the still cameras and automatics. Later, over 300 interior photos sent to the National Science Foundation and the National Archives would comprise the evidence which Admiral Byrd and his crew brought back. 1 p.m., we are now back on the aircraft carrier, having landed with no problem. After a good rest, we will fly to New Zealand tomorrow for immediate return to the United States. According to the clocks on board the Falcon aircraft, the flight lasted 31 hours. But aircraft carrier time showed the Falcon had been absent only 23 hours. Wow. So there's a big discrepancy there in time missing and how time has moved differently down in the interior. Upon his arrival at the aircraft, Byrd sent a coded report to Washington. Then the Admiral and his crew rested for 3 full days on the carrier. Besides the coded report, a fast reconnaissance aircraft took special documents and film to Washington via Sydney, Christchurch, and Panama. Upon Bird's later arrival in the United States, the Admiral was immediately escorted to a top-secret meeting at the Pentagon with the heads of various armed services. Extracts from his log were read, and hundreds of feet of movie footage were shown and explained to the military brass. Today, the specially built Falcon is under wraps at the Wright-Patterson Airfield, Dayton, Ohio. Wow. When the facts of this expedition are released by the Navy, the Byrd plane will go on display in the Smithsonian Institute. Or I don't trust the Smithsonian Institute regardless, because I mean they're completely responsible for quite a lot of the cover-ups, including the cover-ups of the giant skeletons everywhere across the planet that we've been told about. And most of these skeletons were collected and collated, put on board some of these Navy ships, and actually dropped into the deepest parts of our oceans, so they can never be seen again. That's right, because I've got photos of a recent one that was found just recently with a head that wide that it would have actually comprised of a giant that would at least be 36 feet tall. That's huge. That's a big skull. So I can't. As I said, I don't trust the Smithsonian, but maybe hopefully by the time this plane that flew the interior of the Antarctic trip with Byrd, hopefully the Smithsonian by that time might be under the hands and control of decent people instead of the nefarious arse-wipes that have been controlling it for the last, God knows, 100 and something years. Anyway, Institute. Okay. The logbook of the Falcon, written by the navigator and signed by Byrd, was formerly stored in a safe in a single room in the National Archives, used only for the custody of this historical document, the book. It could not be seen without a presidential order. Wow. It was briefly examined by the authors in 1976 for 1 hour, while 2 security personnel stood by. A second examination in 1977 was permitted, with the help of Senator Lawton Chiles of Florida. In 1978, the log was moved to an underground historical vault in the U.S. Air Force Kensington Tombs. So that is where the logbook lays today, everyone. The logbook is in the U.S. Air Force Kensington Tombs, which confirms, validates, corroborates completely all of that testimony that we just read of the interior flight. After the movie showing of the Byrd Antarctic expedition, a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was held with President Harry S. Truman presiding. Conclusions of that historic meeting were recorded by vote that immediate plans should be made for Byrd to return to the bottomless hole at the southern end of the planet, penetrate into the interior and locate the German base with its round-wing planes. The date for the re-entry was set for February 16th, 1947. The American squadron would again ride against the Germans on conventional propeller-driven fixed-wing aircraft. Oh my God, they're sending them down again? In just fixed wing? I thought it's, yeah, okay. Right, what's going to happen? I reckon it's going to have their asses handed to them. I'm not kidding. I can tell you now. I think they're going to have their asses handed to them. That's just something my intuition tells me. As for Byrd, he was still not told of the Jefferson round wing. There you go. Thus, there was continued the cover-up of the America's activities in the Antarctic that was to prevent the public from knowing the true intentions of the United States and its post-war allies. Okay, well, we're going to go on now to chapter 11. So before we do, I'm going to quick sip my coffee and just talk with you about it, because I think that's very interesting. It's the fact that sending them down again for another expedition on February 16th, 1947, and that at that time they had not been told about the Jefferson Round Wing project, which is basically America's version of the anti-gravity aircraft that the Germans were developing, which, you know, we all know about the German aircraft, which is Haunebu 1, 2, 3, and 4, each one larger than before. Okay, all anti-gravity. And I believe they didn't tell him, because even at that point in time, that was so well classified, that I do believe that the compartmentalization of such an aircraft being developed was for the continuation and expansion of what they call the US secret space program today. Hence the reason why Byrd was not told about it, and they sent him down in just a propeller wing aircraft with only conventional weaponry. Compartmentalization, people, that's what it's all about. They basically kept it covered up and not told him of the actual development of this plane, because otherwise they would actually make him just as formidable adversary to them, and it would just continue a war. Personally, I think there was intentions there. There was also other things in the background that I'm not sure of yet that are probably, you know, driving this. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe those who was, you know, I mean, we read earlier in previous chapters that those that escaped with the Haunebu, most of these individuals were not involved in crimes against humanity, against the Jews, or persecution of the Jews during World War II. These were groups of people that, you know, wanted peace, and as we saw, they took no evasive action against Byrd when they attached themselves to either wingtip of his plane. You know, they didn't fire upon him, and They obviously left because they did not want to have anything to do with that. They further wanted to expand their knowledge base, wisdom, spirituality. I mean, hence leaving for such a place like the interior of the planet where there are other spiritual groups that live there as well, like from Shambhala, Shangri-La, Agartha, the Agartha network. And then when I say network, that network is very vast, many, many cities. Okay. We also know about the one that's underneath Mount Shasta, Telos. Okay, that is one of many, many cities that are part of that Agartha network. Okay. But I think it's very interesting that they had compartmentalized it so much so back then at that point in time that they had their reasons for sending him down in that fixed wing aircraft because they did not want these sorts of aircraft, or much less the Germans knowing that they had that sort of aircraft either, so they could further project their secret space programs in the future. Okay. Chapter 11, everyone. Byrd stalks the missing Nazis. This is going to be a pretty interesting chapter, I'm sure. They're sending him down, actually, as I said, 16th of February, 1947. They're going for a third. So we've only been told, really, history is stuff that we've had to learn ourselves, that primarily Byrd only went to the North Pole once and to the South Pole once. Well, here we are. We've been told that the South Pole expedition was 3 times. So you can see how just the angle of which the American government were taking in order to actually cover this information up, and the lengths at which they've gone to as well. Let's have a sip. Okay, this is going to be a bit of a big chapter, I'm sure. So bear with me, guys. All right, here we go. Admiral Byrd stalks the missing Nazis. On February 16, 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd led his squadron of 8 propeller-driven Falcon bombers to the South Pole to test German resistance. Each plane was powered by 4 Pratt & Whitney engines and tuned with precision for the Endurance flight into the unknown interior of the Earth. The planes were fully armed, but orders from President Truman was that Byrd was not to fire on any German craft he met in the Hollow Earth. That just shows you right there. He was ordered by President Truman not to fire, even though they were carrying conventional weaponry. As the squadron repeated the flight pattern executed the year before, Byrd and his crew surveyed the terrain. Only this time, besides his own crew, a total of 60 astonished combat veteran Americans were also descending in a straight southerly line towards the interior of the planet that was presumed to be of solid molten core. They carefully noted that the mouth of the double funnel, or screw, as Byrd called it, had a 500-mile opening in the bottom of the Antarctic Valley that tapered down into a diameter of 125 miles through this opening. 125 miles. Through this opening, they would fly for 800 miles toward the interior before emerging again in a vortex-like aperture inside the Earth. Gradually, the bottom of the hole to the interior widened as it did at the top side until the squadron of Falcons found themselves entering into a hollow world within a world. Above the planes, the crew saw what appeared to be sky and clouds. Below was sea and land just as above. They were now on the interior of the Hollow Earth, which Byrd in 1929 had described as that enchanted continent in the sky, a land of everlasting mystery. Whereas on the outer surface of the planet, a direct line of vision on the convex surface is 7 miles, a straight visual sighting on the surface of the Earth's interior would be an infinitum except for the air impurities. Compass on the aircraft, strangely enough, returned to normal upon their entrance to the interior of the Earth. They were now descending further inside the Earth's sphere, flying in an atmosphere identical to that on the outside of the planet. The seas and land masses clung to the interior walls, and the void between was filled with clouds and light, in which they were seen mirages of the sea and terrain below. As the outside earthlings sped on at 259 miles per hour, every sight they beheld triggered new stimuli of curiosity. They were not flying into a molten mass, and the only heat and light energy source came from a diminutive, misty ball of fire, an interior sun that seemed to hang suspended in front of them in the center of the globe's interior. Okay, it's funny that they say that a diminutive, misty ball of fire, an interior sun that seemed to hang suspended in front of them in the center of the globe's interior. So we've got a hollow cavern, and in the center of that, just hovering, sitting silently in the center of it, is a sun-like ball of fire. So basically a star, okay? Because most stars out there are suns, okay? So I'm curious now as to whether or not the actual planet is a Dyson sphere that's been carefully constructed around a star, and then the outside mantles and crusts and surface later put on top. You know where we've seen this before? Now I'm going to take the piss out of this. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Each planet at the end of that movie was being constructed via a Dyson sphere. And it was being constructed around suns. That's quite interesting. I'm just speculating now. Okay, it's just a mere thought, a theory. Okay, I'm not saying that that's exactly what our planet is comprised of. Okay, just interesting, because I do know that Type 1 civilizations out there have the actual technological capability of building Dyson spheres around stars to basically use them as the power source for the planet. That means that planet can then be moved anywhere it wants to be moved to. Okay, we've heard of all different sorts of things in relation to these power sources in the past, but it also provides light, heat, okay, and ability to grow photosynthesis, the process of photosynthesis and growing plants and food. Okay, yeah. It just makes me very curious when I hear things like that. An actual diminutive, misty ball of fire, an interior sun that seemed to hang suspended in front of them in the center of the globe's interior. Truly fascinating. As I said, I'm only speculating. I might have it completely wrong there. The land masses below were protrusions on the insides of the Earth's 800 to 1200 mile thick mantle. The flyers observed one major difference from the outside of their planet. The interior appeared to have a greater land surface, for as they continued south, their visions widened in this new concave world surrounding them. There were no celestial bearings, no pole star or planet Venus on which to take a dead reckoning. That's a reading, okay? To be able to gain their position. Each hoped their squadron could find its way out. In this unbelievable world of fantasy, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, commanding 8 Navy Falcons and 60 airmen, were stalking Germans. A bellicose nation from the Earth's surface had broken into the interior in search of another Aryan race, with whom they had fought 2 world wars in the present century. Was the enemy here in this lair, and would he fight? Byrd had taken his squadron further than he himself had ventured the year before. He was now recording a distance of over 2,400 air miles from base. Still flying north at approximately 10,000 feet, Byrd's navigator, Captain Ben Miller of Navy Air Arm, spotted what appeared to be an airfield. Only hours before, Captain Miller had joined Byrd's crew. He had temporarily turned over to his second in command, the command of his carrier from which the flight departed when Byrd's original navigator had taken ill at the last moment. Who cares? All eyes of the American squadron peered down and confirmed the sighting. A closer scrutiny revealed various fixed-wing aircraft lined up in rows, and high-powered lenses picked up picked out their identity markings. Swastikas, the emblems of the Nazi Germany, were clearly visible. The American squadron flew on. They reached a point of 2,700 miles within the Earth before the order was given by Byrd to return. The cameras on Byrd's plane whirred away as the pictorial account of his journey was made. An hour later, the planes returned over the same compass bearing. Down below, they had seen rows of buildings on their trip north and endless plains at a particular bearing. Now these were gone. The pictures developed by National Defense Defense later showed that the airport had been quickly camouflaged.
Light bending technology. That's light bending camouflage. So obviously someone had turned on the generator to bend the light around whatever was actually on the ground so that those that were flying over could not see them. Okay?
Wow. Suddenly the Falcon pilots observed that they had uninvited company. Above them and behind them on their tails were 5 unmarked round-wing planes, which the Germans had finally elected to expose. Byrd had come to his new German world poorly prepared for decisions of the conduct of aerial confrontation. He was primarily an explorer. The Joint Chiefs of Staff had assessed his capabilities, and at the last-minute briefing, Byrd was ordered not to fire on any Germans if he encountered them in flight. Those instructions exist today and were explicit. In addition, Byrd did not evaluate his squadron's vulnerability in the present air strategy, which the 5 round-wing planes controlled. And worse, he regarded the German piloted round-wing planes as his natural enemy, with whom there could be no compromise. Silly man.
Just goes to show you how feeble-minded some of these individuals are back then, thinking that there's no compromise or finding a level common ground that they can talk.
Yet Byrd was not a combat admiral.
Yeah, as he said, he was just an explorer. But yeah, he's making judgments like that.
Did he fail at that time to discern that his enemy, so-called, had abandoned the propeller or even jet-powered aircraft of World War II vintage? Certainly Byrd was cognizant from his experience the year before that the Germans now rode in the sky in advanced design aircraft that made his conventional Falcon aircraft completely outmoded. Absolutely. But on the other hand, giving Admiral Byrd the benefit of the doubt, did he purposely intend to confront the Germans and make them show their hand? No one knows what illogical drive motivated him in the last moment's decisions, but they were not the result of any wise on-the-spot military sagacity or desire for survival. The only thing that can be said on behalf of Byrd is that the round-wing planes were conundrums that in his mind produced a panic. Now, in saying that, people, I just want to quickly remind you of some of that footage of Admiral Byrd that has appeared, that is online, that anyone can go and view. I might go and actually find it myself and put the link in the description for you to actually go and look at it later on for yourselves. But in my mind, looking back at the a TV interview that he did upon a return from the Antarctic expedition. Oh, sorry, I've just hit my cord again. I hate recording with these headphones. I'm going to have to buy myself some cordless headphones. It's a pain in the ass. Okay. In my mind, as I said, I remember the TV interview that he did in relation to returning from the Antarctic expedition. And the look on his face was one of very somber, very depressed, if anything, knowing full well that I believe his mind, his facial expressions at that time were basically telling a story that he felt gut-wrenchingly disgusted and appalled with the fact that he had led 30 of the 60 men to their deaths. Half of these groups have been basically had their asses handed to them. And I have read this chapter, so I know what I'm basically saying here. I will prove that later on. But yeah, essentially out of the 60 airmen that were sent down, only half of them survived. And knowing full well that he was sent down unprepared in only conventional aircraft, when also he was not told about the round wing aircraft that were down there that the Germans had built. He not only was depressed, but also pissed off with the fact that he was not given the true information before leaving. Otherwise, he probably would never have done the expedition, and those men would still be alive. Hence the reason why he had such a somber, depressed look on his face during that interview. I mean, like, I look at the man that was before he went to that interview, because there are black and white interview video footage, and he's a very sprightly sort of gentleman, very out there. He has a very vibrant personality to some degree, but also very Navy-like minded. Okay, but you can see that he was a very bright, bubbly personality to some degree, and very proud of who he was. But that interview that he gave after Antarctica's return was a very somber one. So I'll put the link in the description for you to go and have a look at for yourselves, and you be the judge of that, and leave your comments below. I'd love to hear that, because yeah, I'm sure that you too, with your own discernment, will see that he was very upset with himself, depressed that he'd lost half of his squadron, and angry at the same time with his US government for not telling him the truth and basically sending him down there essentially to basically have their asses handed to them. And I would be too. I'd be very pissed off if that was my government setting me up for failure too. That's exactly what the US government did under Harry Truman's watch. Okay. Panic. Byrd had already given orders to his own gunners to be prepared to fire, and his co-pilot reminded him the order should be rescinded. Therefore, all of his aircraft were in a state of combat readiness. Perhaps 10 seconds remained in which the admiral could have changed his mind. Then Byrd received an unexpected message on his wavelength from outside his aircraft. Admiral Byrd, this is General Kurt von Ludwig. Ooh, German. Commander of the flying ships you see above. Our firepower has your squadron covered. The same German commander who was interviewed to substantiate this episode continued. World War II is over. Leave us alone and return to your base. However, if you wish to land at our station in peace, we shall receive you, Americans, in peace, for you are not our enemies. Our aircraft and weapons are so superior to yours that I advise you not to fire on us. There is no chance for your squadron to survive our attack if you insist on fighting. I would also remind you that you are over territory controlled by New Germany and that you are here under our sufferance. Commander Byrd listened but did not reply. When the German had finished speaking, Byrd gave his order in 2 words: open fire. Fool. His aircraft hardly had time to comply before the sky seemed to explode. Those Falcons hit by the Saucer's laser beams broke up and spiraled and nosedived to Earth, where the crews were killed on impact. From what looked like hidden anti-aircraft gun sights on the land below, their emanated pencil-thin broken beams of red light. Laser. And American, that's the directed energy weapons, okay? So here we are in 1940s with directed energy weapons at that point in time. An American witness to one of those planes struck with this ray weapon said, the ray seemed to let us down gradually and our pilot was helpless to maintain control. We had to ditch. Those who could bailed out. Admiral Byrd watched his entire supporting aircraft plummeting out of the sky nearby. Suddenly, the voice of the German commander broke into his wavelength again. Commander Byrd, you are a fool. That's exactly why my head just went down before. That's what I was thinking, you're a fool for opening fire. You have sacrificed your own man. You're warned. Now, leave this land and never return. Leave it once. Byrd was shaken, and there you go. That's another reason why he had such a somber look on his face as well. Not only losing the men and being lied to by his own government, but the fact that he was shaking he was shitting a brick, basically, everyone. Okay? He basically just had his ass handed to him. Okay? Byrd was shaken and quickly went into shock. Miller took over the controls, and yeah, so he obviously had a breakdown right there and then, knowing full well that he just sent those men to their deaths, and pointed the aircraft for the opening that led to the outside, to the top side of the world. Byrd had carried out his orders to find the Germans. He had entered the young lion's den, but he was no Daniel. Indeed, the scene that followed as the American planes crashed to earth was not reminiscent of a wartime landing in hostile enemy territory. American survivors picked up by the Germans were interviewed in 1977 to verify the German version of what took place. They were interviewed afterwards. Wow. The Germans immediately mounted an all-out rescue attempt in order to save the American airmen. Some of the crashed American planes were not severely disabled. From these, the occupants were quickly crawled out with their hands over their heads. They were met by Germans who immediately disarmed them and asked them to drop their hands from being on top of their heads, drop their hands, saying that they were in friendly territory. German crews hurriedly raced to the totally demolished American planes, extinguished fires, and removed bodies in an attempt to save lives. That doesn't sound like the normal Germans of, the World War II that were on the surface. Wow. 26 live Americans were finally assembled that day by the Germans as ambulances with doctors sped to the scene. Paramedics administered first aid to the surviving American crew members as the ambulances headed to nearby hospitals in New Berlin. At the hospital, German specialists set limbs and carefully stitched wounds and made the Americans as comfortable as possible. Occasionally, the Germans addressed the Americans in English, some quietly telling how they had taken their degrees at German and American institutions. So they were still traveling at that point in time from down there to the surface and actually having their, late teens who are, obviously going into their manhood, attend universities in England and America in order to gain certificates, degrees. Crew members, hence the reason why we know that these actual individuals, whether they be of German descent that actually went down there, or those that they live amongst, or those that are out there, are actually walking amongst us here today now. Okay? That's very interesting. Crew members not severely injured were taken into the city. Okay, just have a quick sip, mouth's getting dry. A sign on the outskirts said, New Berlin. The prisoners were then given an escorted automobile tour of the emerging city, which the Germans had secretly begun in the 1940s. Examples of the buildings designed by Albert Speer on the order of Adolf Hitler was shown to the visitors. Stunned by the cautious friendliness of the Germans, the Americans were given a meal and made comfortable in a hotel. So you can actually go down there and sleep in a hotel. That's crazy. But not all Americans were so fortunate. As Byrd's plane sped homeward to his carrier base, German morticians embalmed and dressed the young Americans killed in the New Berlin raid. Using ID cards, victims were identified, features restored when necessary, and then redressed in their own flight suits. The remains were placed in sealed plastic coffins. The German commander came in and met some of the surviving American officers. Introducing himself, he called them heroic fools, indeed. The next day was February 17th, 1947. Open German army trucks had picked up the various bodies of the young Americans. The vehicles assembled, and slowly the cortege bore the dead American airmen through the broad streets of the new city. At the convoy's head, a German military band played Mendelssohn's Funeral March. I hope I pronounced that. Mendelssohn's? Yes, Mendelssohn's Funeral March. Behind the cortege, German airmen themselves, in honor, marched in slow step. Escorted in cars, American survivors brought up the rear. So they honored them. Wow. As the funeral procession moved forward, moved toward the airfield, cannons were fired in the air, and all German flag on government buildings flew at half-mast as the dead and living Americans were prepared for their trip home. For the Americans and the Germans, it was the unofficial end of World War II combat. At the New Berlin airport, 5 sources sat waiting. The dead Americans in unbreakable plastic coffins were placed on board another craft. Okay, hold on. The dead Americans were placed in unbreakable plastic coffins. Okay, what looked like plastic, probably to them, to me, says that they were probably placed in transparent aluminum coffins, unbreakable. Because plastic is breakable. It's made from an oil-based, petroleum-based product. Wow. The 24 walking cases were taken on board 2 other German craft. Finally, Commander Kurt von Ludwig and his crew boarded the lead ship. A squadron of 5 German UFOs rose silently and headed south to the hole at the end of the world to pay a regretful respect to 60 living and dead Americans. So, as I said, half, 30 of them. 32, actually, because there was only 28 live men still standing at the end of this. Emerging from the South Pole funnel, the sources took a northerly course from the Antarctic continent towards Australia. Australia! Hey! Approximately 1,800 miles southwest of Sydney, Australia, a US aircraft carrier hove to the radio request of German commander. As the fleet rear Admiral Crutzen listened, flat-top commander Ben Miller, now back in control of his own ship, was hooked into the radio of the German round-wing plane. A friend of Commander Miller then spoke from the German craft. The American survivor appealed to the commanding officer to allow the Germans to land on one of the ends of the actual carrier flight deck to deliver the American survivors. The German UFOs sat down as Commander Kurt von Ludwig hovered above in an altitude of surveillance. Americans stood down. No guns were drawn, no orders were given, no battle positions were taken. The walking Americans stepped out and then moved to the other German round-wing planes to remove the wounded. These were placed or helped on deck. American sailors began to stand at attention, and many officers stood silent at silent salute. No American word had been spoken. No German voice had been heard. When the last stretcher was removed, the German UFOs silently lifted and joined their commander aloft. Then suddenly, they were gone. Under sedation in the carrier sickbay, Admiral Byrd had missed the last chapter of the tragic drama he had begun. From below the carrier deck, where was I? Below the carrier flight deck, an ambulance plane was hoisted. Within 20 minutes, it too was airborne, headed for Honolulu, Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor was alerted to receive the injured. The same night, over 10,000 miles away from the carrier, 5 round-wing planes appeared at 8 p.m. over Arlington, Virginia. They stopped in midair and hovered over the tomb of the World War I's unknown soldier. A German round-wing plane broke formation and landed in an open area near the tomb. The door of the craft opened and darkened forms brought out the bodies of the 30 airmen who had perished 2 days before. Okay, there is a spirit believed. That's something. Hold on a sec. I want to go back for a sec because I thought they just dropped off 32 bodies on the aircraft carrier. This is actually, I don't know if I've read that right before. Did they only place, those that were walking and able to walk go on to the other saucer when they arrived on the aircraft carrier deck and remove the wounded? Or did they remove the wounded and those that were dead? Because here it's saying that these 30 bodies were brought to the tomb of the unknown soldier from World War I. And for me, that contradicts what they said before. So I'm hoping I got that wrong. Okay, my apologies. I think I actually do have it wrong because looking back in my mind, I do believe that it said it wounded only. So why would they drop the actual dead 30 bodies here? I suppose we're going to find out in a second anyway. All right. There is a spirit believed to be that of the unknown soldier, which had appeared often in the past whenever a body lay in a state under the Capitol Rotunda. It was seen by many at Kennedy's death. President John F. Kennedy Sr. It appeared when the body of President Eisenhower lay in state, and also appeared on the death of President Hoover, Johnson, and other notable Americans. Excuse me. The night of February 12th, as the Germans placed the bodies of the dead airmen before the tomb of the unknown soldier, completing their task, they stepped back and surveyed the darkened scene for a moment before entering their airships. As they watched, the apparition of the dead doughboy of the American Expeditionary Force in World War I was suddenly seen again. It gave a brisk salute and then vanished. The Germans themselves swear this appearance took place. What arrangements were made with the next of kin is not known. Nevertheless, 30 men of all ranks were buried with full military honors at the cemetery. Okay, that's the reason why they brought them back there. Today, in nearby building, a building of bronze plaque reposes inscribed with the names of the young heroes and how they died in the center of the earth. The plaque will be erected in the year 2000. Okay, well, everyone that's in America that actually, that are audience members that live anywhere near this place, okay, where they can actually prove that this actual plaque exists, describing the actual confrontation of the 30 airmen that died in the inner earth. I'd like for anyone that's out there that's part of the my American audience, if they live anywhere near where they say near the tomb of the unknown soldier, okay, of World War One. If that plaque exists, yeah, send me a photo of it. I'd love to see it, and you can send that in the email. Send that to the email that I'll leave in the description as well. And that's what it says. I mean, it would be erected in the year 2000. We're year 2024 now, so it's been sitting there for 24 years. So, yep, Arlington Cemetery, guys. Go and have a look. It's the second time I've hit this bloody tripod today, guys. Sorry about that. Get a smaller tripod and put it on the table in front of me, I suppose. But that's all good. I'll set up. I just haven't got my studio set up properly at the moment, unfortunately, everyone. From Arlington Cemetery, 3 of the German sources stopped above the Capitol building and 2 hovered above the White House, where the Trumans lived. Simultaneously, all 5 shone powerful searchlights on the buildings below. The Washington military was alerted. Then the German commander spoke via the Air Force radio channel. He said, "This display of our strength is a warning. If we so wished, we would destroy both your White House and Capitol with deadly rays, and within 5 minutes, both historic places would be only ashes. Send no more armed military expeditions below unless America wants full-scale war," the German warned. "If it is war you seek, then we shall fight you. But as for New Germany, we prefer peace and the friendship of America." The voice finished by saying, "The real enemy of both our peoples is Russia." No, I don't believe that either. All night, the German sources hovered over Washington. Little did they suspect the US chose not to show any of its military strength from the arsenal of over 500 laser-equipped round-wing planes hidden across the land. The German craft departed westward at 9 a.m. the next day in a burst of speed. In 1948, acting independently of the Americans or other nations, the Russians, who had watched the 1947 bird foray in the Antarctic from an Antarctic base, sent a fully armed wing of conventional combat aircraft to the Earth's interior at the north. The Russians, told of the Americans' 1947 reception by the Germans at the South Pole, but uncertain of the outcome, elected to penetrate the North Pole entrance from their bases. The Russian planes were computer cloaked by Americans passing Point Barrow, Alaska, heading due east. Canadian bases on 3 northerly locations kept the Russian planes spotted. The American base reported 102 planes. The Canadian checkpoints reported 97 planes. The Russians' first aerial encounter was with the Guardians of the North Pole entrance, descendants of the Vikings, whom the Germans called the Old Race. The Russian planes at first were challenged by the Old Race, but were allowed to proceed when they claimed that they were on a mission to New Germany in the southern hemisphere. The Russian wing, still intact, continued past the man-made orb of light at the equator of the Earth's interior and sped towards the southern hemisphere, where the Germans' lines then 7 UFOs were now waiting. No Russian enemy plane escaped German wrath. 100 planes and their crews perished. Those Russian bodies recovered were cremated, and 4,500 German UFOs were over Moscow, brazenly scattering the ashes of the Russian dead over the capital. As in the Washington incident, the Germans broke into the military airwaves and taunted the Russians with the statement, "Here are your remains of your brave airmen you sent down to destroy us." Moscow's red alert sounded. Up into the skies to teach the invading Germans a lesson went Russian MiG fighters. One after another, the German machines easily disposed of all the Russian interceptors. Wow. In defiance, the German commander and his undamaged round-wing plane hovered imperially above. Then, over the military frequencies, that moment before cracked with Russian chatter of aerial combat, there came the final German voice. "Next time, we will annihilate you." The Germans flew off, intact. They would taunt the Russians over Moscow year after year, that memorial victory. That day, when the squadron leader, von Ludwig, landed in New Berlin, he patted his plane and commented, "I shall name her Old Ironsides in honor of today's fight." Ironsides. Wow. Funny about that movie that came out many years ago, Iron Sky. Yeah, had Germans on the interior of the planet, and he actually called his plane Old Ironsides as well. So that's curious. They described it. Well, not called it. He described it. You know, I think you remember him sitting there going, "Old Ironsides here." You know, patting on the side of it with his fist. Yeah. Wow. So very interesting 2 chapters, isn't it? And I'm glad that I was able to give commentary through the actual reading today, due to the fact that I didn't really want to do the commentary at the end and have to remember all that, because lately I've found that I've been having a couple of little brain farts. Not sure if it's the weather or something else, I don't know, but I've been finding that lately I've been having a couple of brain farts where I've been a little bit forgetful. And so I wanted to do the commentary whilst I speak, whilst I'm seeing the information, and that actually has, been able to give you a little bit more context with, some of my thoughts in relation to some of this information that help you kind of understand a little bit better as well. But yeah, in saying that, everyone, that's actually been a very good set of 2 chapters today. I've actually really enjoyed reading that with you, and I hope that you have enjoyed it because, as we're moving closer towards the end of this war that's going on right now, it won't be long, I do believe. I do believe it won't be long until at some point in the near future we will be actually reunited with some of these inner Earth groups that have separated themselves from the surface, that are living peacefully down there with the inner Earth Agartha network. Okay, those that have actually been there for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Okay, and at some point, those that are down there who are also the brethren of those from above. Okay, we all are going to be reunited at some point. It's just a matter of getting through the crap that we have to get through right now because of those that have been on the surface in charge and power for the last 5,000 years. And or more. We know that this history goes back quite a long way in history, 450,000 years to be precise. Okay, but I'm not going to waffle on. I'm going to leave that there for today, guys. I think we've been going for an hour and a half already. That's long enough. I would just like to wrap up and just say thank you again for joining me today here at Starseeds and Patriots of Down Under for chapters 10 and 11. Is it 11 and 10 and 11? Yep, 10 and 11. And we'll continue on next with chapter 12 and 13. very shortly. I'm actually going to be making this a regular event now on Tuesdays. You can actually tune in where that will actually be up and ready for us to actually watch on a Tuesday morning. I'll be in the live chat. So I'll be recording this on Monday night and actually having it up so that it's ready for Tuesday morning scheduled so that we can all be together. And if you just want to talk to me in the live chat, I'll be there as well. But yeah, it's this has been a very awesome little read today, and I've truly enjoyed myself. Just be sure to like and share and subscribe if you're a first timer here, and hit that notification bell as well. And if you'd like, leave us a comment down below and tell us what your thoughts are and give us a little bit of feedback. I love positive or negative feedback. I don't mind it at all. I love hearing people's perspectives because I respect you. Okay, and yeah, just remember, people, hey, there are things that we need to do out there, such as unlearn and discern. Okay, unlearning what we have learned and replacing it with new information that we have attained for using discernment and intuition. Okay, may the force be with us always. Okay, guys. Yeah, I'll put up a few banners, scroll across this kind of a little bit more, you know, at the end of the show. Really, we need positivity, messages of upliftment. Okay, I've also had one come across in the past as well. This is another one is like this is from Confucius, China. Okay? The more I learn, the less I know. It's true statement. The more I learn, the less I have known. So in other words, we are relearning a new information, and it replaces old information with new updated information. And it shows us how little we knew until we find new information, because it builds upon. Okay. And just lastly, before I go, Ad Astra Prospera. We reach for the stars. Through struggle, we reach the stars. That's from Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek himself. Okay. And just remember, live long and prosper, everyone. Okay. I take it easy. Love you all. And remember, I'm learning to discern. Take care, everyone. I'll see you for chapters 12 and 13 next. Okay. All right. Lots of love.